site of that. Lewisham Way, yeah. You'll have to.
Thank you. You can proceed now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yeah, thank you.
The application relates to Lewisham Way use of community centre and the 138 Lewisham Way. This is the retrospective planning application for the change of use of community centre. Use class F2B into recording studio, use class E with ancillary office space and shared community workspace, together with the alterations to the existing shop front, retention of a wooden pergola, landscaping works, installation of replacement, installation of cycle parking, waste and recycling facilities, and the creation of in addition, the officer report.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just thinking you need to speak right into the microphone.
Oh, yes, okay. So in addition to the officer's report published with the agenda, addendum report was published today that outlines changes to the conditions and one additional condition. So the application relates to an existing 3-story building previously used as community center. The surrounding area is characterized by a broad mix of uses, which includes the residential, commercial uses, and other uses such as the Lewisham Art House with artist studios and public gallery, and the large self-storage facility located opposite the site. This slide shows the existing view of the application site. The application site immediately outside the boundary of Brockley Conservation Area and in the setting of a Grade 2 listed Deptford Public Library Art House. And this is the front elevation of the application building. The proposal is for the retrospective change of use to recording studio outlined on this proposed lower ground floor plan. Shared workspace at the ground floor, and office space at the first and second floors. This slide shows the view of the existing rear garden and proposed plan for the retention of wooden pergola and soft landscaping. The application garden features access from the rear. These are front and rear elevations with minor alterations proposed relating to windows and shop front replacement. Key planning considerations are, in terms of principle of the development, it has been demonstrated that loss of community use in this location was part of a wider public service transformation plan and that there is availability of similar community uses in the vicinity. Therefore, officers consider that the proposal addresses policy S1 of London Plan and proposed Class E uses are considered suitable for this location. In terms of urban design, as external changes to the building are of minor nature and or contained to the rear, no harm is considered to be generated upon the streetscape, wider neighborhood character, Brockley Conservation Area, or nearby listed building. In terms of impact on highways, the proposal is car-free and officers are satisfied that the minor scale of development would not result in an increased adverse impact on the local transport network. Bin and cycle storages are adequately provided and accessed from the rear. In terms of impact on neighboring amenity, the proposal is accompanied by noise impact assessment. It is considered that subject to conditions restricting opening hours, securing installation of noise limiters, and appropriate soundproofing, the proposal would not have an unacceptable impact on neighboring amenity. In terms of natural environment, the proposal does not include any significant development in the rear garden that may adversely affect the trees on surrounding site, and further soft landscape improvements would be secured by condition. The application is before members with recommendation for approval has 5 objections received from local residents and 1 from Amenity Society, together with the online petition with 322 signatures. Officers consider that the proposal would provide new uses in a suitable and sustainable location, would not cause harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding conservation area and setting of listed building, and would not result in an unacceptable impact to neighboring amenity or highways and services. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to conditions set out in the report and the addendum.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Can I just there was a bit of that I missed, which was the condition that came through. You said something about the condition that came through today. Could you just spell that out clearly for me, please?
So yes, the addendum report was published today. That includes revisions to the conditions relating to opening hours of rear garden and recording studio, and addition of a new condition that relates to the soundproofing of the lower ground floor recording studio.
James, go.
Sorry, just to confirm, Councillor, so the changes in the conditions now restrict the use of the garden on Sundays and bank holidays, so our EHO thought some additional restrictions were required, and we've also, on the advice of the EHO, reduced the hours of operation of the recording studio component of the use, so that was previously conditioned to start at 7 a.m. It will now be starting at 9 a.m. Monday to Saturday. So when the package was additionally published, we got some neighbour representations, and so we liaised with the EHO and we put some additional conditions on, so the applicants are aware of that.
What time will it close during the week?
6 p.m.
Just one more question. I just want to understand the kind of the timeline of this, because it's been very kind of confusing. I just want to know exactly when, like in terms of year dates, when it stopped being used as a community centre, and when the current applicant took this property over. I want to understand exactly how that happened.
You go ahead, John.
I was going to say we have the applicant here, Councillor, so they can probably answer that on their end when the commercial use started. The committee report sets out when Mayor and Cabinet made the resolution to dispose of the site and grant the leasehold to this group, and I think it was in 2015. And Jasanka will correct me if I'm wrong.
So yes, 2015 was the first Mayor and Cabinet report that recommended this site for the commercial lease, and then in 2017, I think it was confirmed that it was leased, but I think applicants should confirm that.
Yep. Members, do you have a question for the officer? Thank you. Is the applicant here, please?
Sorry, hi, thank you.
Yeah, please introduce yourself. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, members of the planning committee. My name is Ben Markham. I represent the applicant's House of Noise. I wanted to personally come here today to speak about my organisation and our plans for the building. I moved to Lewisham 16 years ago to study music at Goldsmiths, fell in love with the place, and I've lived here ever since. House of Noise started with 2 of the long-standing Lewisham residents 8 years ago, and has grown into an award-winning music and post-production company servicing the film, television and advertising industries. We have 4 full-time employees who all live locally, and we also employ a large number of freelancers who live in the borough. 138 Lewisham Way sadly closed as a community centre in 2016 when the council deemed it no longer viable as a community asset, giving the group that ran the centre the opportunity to offer their services from elsewhere in the borough. Following this, the building was squatted and then placed under 24/7 security at the council's expense. It was then occupied by property guardians whilst Lewisham continuously advertised it to the public for commercial rent. Of the 4 offers received during this period, the plan submitted by our organisation to create an affordable workspace and music studio was considered the most viable by the landlords, Lewisham Council, as noted in section 52 of Jasanka's report. The proposed use offers a good fit with Goldsmiths, Lewisham College and the art house next door.
No, it doesn't.
We plan to support local people within the creative and cultural industries identified as a growth area for the local economy. We're willing to invest considerable capital for the repairs that were desperately needed to the building. We moved into the building in January 2019 after a long application process. The council
you were there
approved
since
our plans for the
2018
building and confirmed to us via their agent that our use was acceptable. Our lease from Lewisham states the permitted use as a recording studio, ancillary offices and ancillary creative space, and we've always kept within this permitted use. Therefore, the main part of this application is to be able to use the property for something Lewisham said that we could do 3 years ago. Since our lease from Lewisham began, we've invested over £75,000 in repairs, whilst drastically improving the safety and cosmetic appeal of the building,
No, you've not.
which remains a council asset. We applied to our landlords, Lewisham, for a licence to alter to make these improvements, receiving full approval. Our idea for the building is to give young people the space for a need to start.
You've been there since 2018.
Further their
You've not
careers
done
at this
anything.
difficult time. The options for affordable workspaces are few and far between for people who are starting out their careers as freelance or self-employed. This, in addition to the housing crisis, sees many young people living in overpriced, shared accommodation at home with family, means many are without a place to work, create and focus. Our price point will be considerably lower than the average in the area, and will offer subsidised memberships to local people on benefits and low incomes.
Bullshit.
Young generations have had things hard, and COVID has only exacerbated this. An article published in The Guardian yesterday revealed how happiness in young people has hit a 13-year low. 16 to 29-year-olds currently.
Unhappiness for hipsters is one thing, but unhappiness for fucking disenfranchised kids from Lewisham is another, mate.
Genuinely needed in the area. Something that has been confirmed by the letter of support from Liz Dart, the Director of Culture, Libraries and Learning. An affordable place where creative people can come together
and why is he getting more than 5 minutes?
Without interruptions of housemates and family members, and meet other like-minded creatives for collaboration and encouragement. The majority of square footage in this building will form the co-working space and affordable private studios. The smallest share of the building in the basement will be dedicated to my organisation for creating music for film and television. However, these studios will also be available to use by Workspace members and the local community.
Bullshit, you're in the
We've confined the studio to the basement in order to isolate the sound. We provided a robust noise report available to view online with our application, which confirms that the proposed soundproofing will ensure no negative impact to the neighbours. The use of sound locks and enhanced soundproofing ensures no noise will escape, as shown on the plans, further safeguarding existing amenity. Concerning the design and heritage of 138 Lewisham Way, the proposed external works are minor but will revitalise the building, ensuring its longevity, and have been designed carefully to preserve the setting of the neighbouring conservation area.
You have 1 minute to go, please.
Listed art house, thank you. Our proposed scheme has evolved in accordance with our previous application, which has 2 reasons for refusal. These issues have now been resolved.
No.
And as a result, the planning officer's report
Community don't want
has recommended our application for full approval. We believe that their assessment is wholly justified. In summary, our plan will bring a long-standing vacant building back into viable use to generate economic activity
for your offices,
within Lewisham,
for your private
thereby
offices,
supporting local
for you and your
residents and
crony
businesses.
mates.
We believe that the application should be granted planning permission in line with the officer's recommendations, and request that members vote in favour of supporting local business by granting us permission for this proposal. Thank you for your time. I'm more than happy to answer any further questions you might have.
Thank you. Members, do you have a question for the applicant, please? Councillor Russo, please.
I'd like to understand a lot more about the community garden space and how that's actually going to be a proper community garden, how that's going to be organised, what we're going to do to actually make sure that actually is a proper.
Yeah, certainly. So, there's this massive outside space at the building, and we wanted to try and share that with the community. And
you've had 4 years.
Part of the co-working space would be that members of the public can come there and use it, and the idea of the community garden would be to open that space up to people who maybe just don't want to be inside working and want to come and use it for any kind of purposes that they see fit, be that meetings, local groups, if they want to come and do yoga. We'll leave it completely open to the community for them to ask how they want to use it, and then we'll be open to having them use it within the restricted hours.
I'm afraid that sounds very loose to me.
Yes.
That's not really how community spaces operate.
Yes.
It just, you can't just expect community to come and just do their thing. It needs infrastructure and planning. And
yeah, sorry.
I sort of understand what, how you've actually kind of going to actually make that work and how the space is designed.
Me and my 3 mates will smoke roll-ups in the garden.
So the workspace will be employing people to run the workspace, and the management of the workspace will be done. The garden will be an extension of that. So all the management will be done by people that will be employing, and hopefully, if things get approved, they will be the ones managing it. We're just providing the space.
Okay. Councillor Krusky, if it's helpful, I think this situation differs in planning terms a little bit than the previous application. So the church has a community use agreement. So as Alfie said in his presentation, they would sort of give space back to sort of particular groups, and that's managed by plan. In this case, it's a commercial arrangement, so it's effectively an ancillary use to the other constituent elements of that part of the use. So we wouldn't require a community use plan in this case because it's ancillary to the to the workspace that's being leased out to another occupier.
Any objectors here, please? Yeah, thank you. You have 5 minutes to speak. Please introduce yourself, please.
Sorry, before we do that, I think there's also an objector who's virtual, Mr. Perry, and we just wanted to make sure that the time was split between the two objectors.
Can I just say, I think Mr. Perry and I discussed that I would speak for him. He'd have to, maybe confirm that, but I have worked with him.
I see Mr. Perry's giving us a virtual thumbs up over there, so I think I think you're good to go.
Thank you.
Right, I'm Claire Cowan, the chair of Brockley Society. Brockley Society objects to this. Our objection to this proposed change is to the change to Class E. We're asking for the committee to retain planning class F2B to avoid the loss forever of a community asset. We're hoping that it could in the future be available for community use again. I could just mention that Brockley Society, among others, was responsible for the campaign to save Lewisham Art House from going into completely commercial use. The Grade 2 listed building next door, which is mentioned very much in this application. The Youth and Community Centre at 138 Brockley, Lewisham Way, was vital for young black people for 40 years, from 1973 until 2016. It wasn't only black young people, but it was largely that as a safe place where they could go and learn all kinds of different things and develop in a multitude of different ways. This centre has been a part of Lewisham's cultural heritage. It was very much involved with the development of Lovers Rock, a particular kind of music developed out of reggae. The applicants are musicians. This may not be their taste in music. That's very understandable, not something they necessarily know much about. But it was a very important development within the musical world of the time. And it was very much centered around the recording studio for the Lovers Rock label that was developed around the corner from the centre, and the young people at the centre used it a lot. It was a real hub of cultural activity, and above all a safe place in a neutral location, not on any one estate or another, but in a well served with transport place on Lewisham Way. So it's part of the borough's cultural history, and in this year of the Borough of Culture, that's very important. It seems that that history is somehow being written out of things. It closed when the funding disappeared in what was then the current climate. It wasn't because it was no longer needed, but there were obviously difficulties and there were funding problems. There may have been, whatever the consultation was, didn't involve Brockley Society, or it was such a general one that it, never really came home to the local people. Now, in this application, it said that alternative community facilities exist in the area. They exist on paper, but they do not exist in practice.
Yes.
We desperately need these, both in the Brockley and the Ladywell ward next to it. When we try to find places for Brockley Assembly meetings, or for when Brockley Society wants meetings, it is very difficult. There are no community halls of any sort left. The TRA nearby Tanners Hill used to have meetings in the centre. They can't anymore because it isn't there. We applied unsuccessfully for NSIL funding, and the officer, Yusenka, has sort of noticed that we were unsuccessful in that application for NSIL funding into a feasibility study for some kind of community use for the centre. We hope that via agreement with all parties, including the applicants, and possibly including the art house extending its community functions, that we could find a way to have community activity, a community centre in the building. We were unsuccessful in that, but we were successful in a parallel and similar one for a much smaller building in Breakspear's Mews Community Garden, where we applied for money for a feasibility study to see if this long unused council building could be put to use to support the community garden and other local community activities. That highlights the need for these kind of community facilities.
Yeah, not hot desking for hipsters.
So we're surprised. We feel that the consultation in 2015, when the centre was closed, was inadequate. Certainly, we weren't told about it. There's nothing this committee can do about that. But we were surprised that the lease was signed without prior planning permission. That should not have happened.
Yeah.
And I think I hastily was looking for the lease. I think there is a clause in the lease that says there's community involvement, which the applicants have sought to address. We will need to work on this kind of thing if this goes through, because their plans, community gardens, and that's been answered before I've spoken, but this kind of community involvement is tricky. It's has to be handled.
Please, can you round up, please? Your time is up, please.
My time is up. We welcome the conditions that are proposed, including the ones on the document today, but we're asking the committee to please retain the current planning class F2B. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any question for the object? Not yet. Is Councillor Panford wants to speak on standing order, please?
Should I put that up on the screen, Councillor Penfold?
Okay, well, thank you. Letting me speak on this. I'm one of the Brockley councillors, as you know. This matter concerns an application by the House of Noise for change of use from Class F2B to Class E. So in other words, we're talking from community use to commercial use. I've met the applicants, and they are thoroughly decent people, and I think they're caught up in something really not of their own making.
Yeah.
But I have to put that aside and state why I believe permission should not be granted
on holiday by
for change
mistake.
of use. As has been said, the centre was a vital part of the local community for more than 40 years, from 1973 until its closure in 2016. In Joan and Ada's book, The History of Black Lewisham, the centre is described as a place where West Indians could come together, helping to increase their sense of identity and confidence in themselves. The centre offered multiple activities: choirs, music production, numeracy and literary classes, mentoring, photography, drama, filmmaking and dance. There is a great need for community facilities, particularly youth clubs in the area. The centre is on a main road with good transport links and is accessible and could benefit hundreds of people.
Yes.
One of the reasons the applicant's previous application was turned down was because the applicant failed to demonstrate there was no demand for social infrastructure for facilities.
Yeah.
You see paragraph 2.8 of the officer's report.
Good lad.
In coming to this conclusion for turning the previous application down, Lewisham officers cited 3 bits of policy. So the first was the national policy framework at paragraph 91, which is now paragraph 92.
That's the
This
one.
states that developments of planning should promote social interaction, including opportunities for meetings between people who might otherwise not come into contact with each other.
Yes.
And the paragraph goes on to state that such places should be safe and accessible, and they should be there to enable and support healthy lifestyles, especially where this would address identified health and well-being needs. They also talk about the London Plan Policy S1, and that states, para F, development proposals that would result in a loss of social infrastructure in an area of defined need,
yes,
as identified in the Borough's Social Infrastructure Needs Assessment required under Part A, should only be permitted where there are realistic proposals for re-provision that continue to serve the needs of the neighbourhood and wider community, or the loss is part of a wider public service transformation plan, which requires investment in modern fit-for-purpose infrastructure and facilities to meet further population needs or to sustain and improve services. G says redundant social infrastructure should be considered for full or partial use as other forms of social infrastructure before alternative developments are considered, unless this loss is part of a wider public service transformation. And finally, Lewisham's own policy, the core strategy, Policy 19. The Council will work with its partners to ensure a range of health, education, policing, community, leisure, arts, cultural entertainment, sports and recreational facilities and services are provided, protected and enhanced across the borough. The work of the Lewisham Infrastructure Delivery Plan and the relevant corporate plans and strategies of the partners will be used to inform provision. The Council will apply the London Plan policies relating to healthcare, education and community and recreational facilities to ensure A, there is no net loss of facilities.
Yeah.
So Lewisham have changed their position from the previous application, and they've done this for essentially two reasons if you read the papers. Firstly, there are two letters from Lewisham officers which effectively say that the youth centre was badly run. Secondly, the applicant has produced a list of facilities which they say are alternative
bullshit
facilities, effectively replacing the now demised youth centre. Lewisham also mentioned some of these facilities, and earlier in the week I sent you a copy of the applicant's planning and heritage statement. I'm sure you've all got that in front of you, and if I draw your attention to paragraph 416 of that statement, it lists various facilities which it claims replace 138 Lewisham Way. Firstly, actually the council says it's not the applicant, Goldsmiths College. Well, this is not for the wider community, but this is for students studying for degrees.
Yeah.
Then there's Lewisham College. Again, this is not really for the wider community.
Yeah. Yes, mate.
Then the applicant names Lewisham Art House. This is not a community centre. It is a place where artists can exhibit their work, and there are artist studios. The applicant then names that place in the park. This is not a community centre.
Yes, mate.
It is a low-ceiling cafe and play centre for toddlers, only open between 9 and 2:30 in the daytime.
You picked it
The
up.
Leander Centre and the Leander Youth Club. I think they may be separating one facility here. There is the Leander Nursery for Children on the Peabody Estate. There is also the Leander Centre, which is a community space. However, it is in the middle of the Peabody Estate on a private road, away from transport links and not well known or easily accessible. From my own experience, I know how hard it is to book. Then they mentioned Blueprint for All. This is not a community centre.
Yeah.
This used to be known as the Stephen Lawrence Centre. It is privately owned. It is open only during the daytime. It does offer community courses, but they are quite high level. For instance, current courses involve leadership and a course on equalities in sexual health services. We then have Deptford X. This is not a community centre. These are artist studios. So apart from the Leander Centre, there is no other community centre in the ward. All the other centres and facilities which the applicant has listed are either not community centres or they're out of the ward, and even in some cases they're out of the borough. So for instance, the Moonshot Centre, also mentioned by Lewisham, is an excellent centre, but it's the other side of Fordham Park in New Cross Ward. I sent you a map earlier, and if you look at that, I've marked where 138 Lewisham Way is. All these supposed alternatives, which aren't really alternatives at all, apart from perhaps the Leander Centre, are all to the north of the borough. As Claire Cannon says, there is nothing. If you go south from 138 Lewisham Way, there is nothing.
Yeah.
There are no community centres. I know, because it's very hard to get anywhere to organise a Labour Party meeting. So,
all right.
Lewisham's acceptance of the current scheme sends 2 points. One, firstly, that the centre was badly run. That may or may not be the case, but that was then, and this is now.
Slanderous.
There is nothing to say that this cannot be a well-run and well-used community centre in the future.
Exactly.
Following on from this, Lewisham has decided that the site is part of the wider public service transformation plan, and with the availability of other centres for community use in the vicinity, Officer considers that the proposal complies with policy S1 of the London Plan. This is clearly an attempt to get around the policy, as I felt to understand how a private recording studio, which is clearly a niche business, could be said to be part of a wider public service transformation. When one of the councillors just now tried to push the point about community use, she was told by the officer that it was a private enterprise. The other point that Lewisham are now satisfied on is the applicant has shown that they have demonstrated that there is no demand for social infrastructure facilities in the local area. The applicant has done no such thing. The applicant hasn't shown that there is no demand. What the applicant has done is shown that, in their view, there are alternative facilities in the area. I believe that I've shown in the submission, with a possible exception of the Leander Centre, there is no comparable facility. Yes. I urge this committee not to agree to a change of use, otherwise this building on the prime site will be lost to the community forever.
Come on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Penfold. I just wanted to clarify one point that you were making around the provision of a commercial facility as being part of the community transformation plan. That's not the officer position. Our view is that the submissions that you're making needed to be put to Mayor and Cabinet in 2015 around the defunding and the shuttering of the community centre at that juncture. But our view is that
it was shuttered in 2016.
Follows on from the closure of the facility. So it's met the policy tests, and the submissions that you're making around what is where, and then the information that you've included in the map, that really should have been put to the mayor at the time that the matter was under debate.
With the greatest respect, James, the previous application was turned down on the very grounds I'm saying this one should be turned down, which was that there was no alternative provision. That's nothing to do with the Mayor and Cabinet in 2015. That's to do with the previous application.
So, Councillor Penfold, the material difference is, and I've recirculated the correspondence to the committee members that sets out the director. So Liz Dart as well as James Lee have made submissions to the planning officers with respect to that being part of a wider transformation plan. So what happened in terms of the Mayor and Cabinet's decision in 2015 has been confirmed by officers. So we have that before us at this juncture.
I'm not challenging that. I'm challenging that there is no alternative facility, and that the reason for closure was that it was badly run.
I mean, whether it was poorly run or whether it was well run, the Mayor and Cabinet's decision was that the funding would end, and that's set out in the relevant paragraphs.
Yeah, and they kept the use as community use.
Councillors coming to speak about the issues, but the addendum makes it clear that whether or not they would turn down for else and so funding for an alternative use, or what the provision was at the juncture in 2015.
Can you explain why the previous application was turned down then?
Because there wasn't that material information before us to give us information around whether or not the policy test as to the closure of the facility amounting to a community transformation was met.
And I've just established that that's not the case.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the officer view on the matter, Councillor?
Fuck the officer view.
Councillor Van, please. Yes, I fail to see when the change of use from a community, free for all facility to a studio, how it's going to affect the footfall of the youth who want to probably...
Yes, exactly. There'll be none. It's just for this guy and his two mates.
They have probably grown up using the facility. So how is that going to be affecting the community in terms on that sense? Because obviously in the community we are trying to get people out of crime, and therefore if the youth haven't got anywhere to go, they end up into crime. And I really support the community facilities. Obviously that's
they're creative seeking workspaces
to this application, but I really want to know if that has been considered in this application. No. Obviously, the footfall, how people used the facility before, and how the impact.
Read my statement, mate.
The change of use, if we go ahead.
Councillor Burnett, I'm sorry, but that's a question you should have put to the Mayor and Cabinet in 2015. So the material issues tonight are effectively whether the change of use is acceptable in principle. So you have the officer view that it is, insofar as the loss of the community facility is part of a wider transformation plan. So we have the officer correspondence that confirms that. So that's the material change. I'm hoping we will get to speak about noise, because I think that's the sort of salient issue here.
No, it's not.
The applicants have
worked
very hard with our environmental health officer.
That's a straw man argument. It's not about the noise.
Address the noise impacts. So the adjoining occupiers have withdrawn their objections in respect to noise.
That's
so I'm hoping we can touch on that. But in terms of the principle, whether there was footfall in 2015 to a closed community centre isn't material for planning committee C tonight.
Why?
Sorry, officer. Just a follow-up there. It doesn't matter. I don't think it makes sense that because I didn't. The question wasn't asked then. It's irrelevant now. I don't think that one is. Is a fair representation of this application in terms of the current situation, as it were.
What the footfall was to the community centre in 2015 isn't a material planning consideration tonight, Councillor.
Why? It should be.
Skip me.
This is probably kind of a completely stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there any way at all that we could kind of come around this a different way? And is there any way that this particular the organisation who's already in there and already spent 75 grand on doing repairs,
they've had free rent for 5 years,
sound installation and all the rest of it, because we said that we wanted.
They've had free rent for 5 years. They've been making money off it for 5 years.
We don't have to change the class of the building, but we can actually still work with them as a partner, so that we don't lose it as a community space ultimately. But because it seems to me that they're making lots of effort to try and make it a community space.
They're not.
So is there not a way that we can work with them to actually just...
They're just white middle class boys.
Personally, I don't think that's a silly question at all, Councillor. I think it's a good question. But in planning terms, and I know we come back to this time and time again, there's sort of two parts to this. One is the principle, and that was effectively decided in 2015. Because
well, it was the wrong principle, and you've got to change it.
It's planning permission, and it is incontrovertibly a commercial use. So it's a recording studio, it's office space, and then it's an ancillary garden. So the applicant's entitled to, as a commercial user, they've signed a lease with Lewisham following on from the closure.
And they've broken that lease.
What we have before us is an application to change the use of the building to commercial premises, and so that's the application that's before members.
Don't do it. Come on, you went into politics for a reason.
Members.
I think I do really want to understand in terms of the noise situation and how that is actually being controlled properly. So I'd like to hear more about that from the applicant and maybe the officers as well.
Yeah. So is this specifically about the recording studio and the sound installation for that area? Yeah. So in our noise report that was submitted with the application, it gives details of the material makeup that we've basically built rooms within the building to stop sound leaking out. So there's a window, there's another window now in front of it. There's new walls that surround the external fabric of the building. There's this term sound locks. What it basically means is like a room within a room. So you have the back door, which is like an office space. You have a double door which closes, and then the recording room is in the centre of the building. And on the other side, you've got the same thing. You've got a double door, another double door that basically works as like a mini airlock, and it stops sound from leaking out. And there's been full, insulation in the floor, in the ceiling. You build up lots of different materials, and it creates more surfaces to absorb the sound and stop sound leaking out, which is why we've been using it as a studio for 3 years and we've had 0 sound complaints.
And making loads of money off it because you're not paying rent because you've got a cheap lease.
Councillor Kuskick, I just wanted to follow that one up by to give you a little bit of background about where we got to on noise. So the noise and nuisance team again confirmed for us that they've never had any complaints made with respect to the site, so it's been in operation for 3 years. An abatement notice has never been issued on the site.
They've been there since 2018.
As I sort of said previously, the applicants have been extremely flexible. So what happened was the neighbors approached the council. They instructed a noise consultant to review the submitted noise impact assessment, and so unlike the last application where the environmental health officer looked at it and said this is suitable subject to condition, with the additional information prepared by the neighbors, so it's done by a professional noise consultant, they were colleagues, she said that she wanted some additional information and some additional controls. So she worked with her professional colleague who had made those submissions, and we sort of hammered out a set of conditions. The applicants have agreed to that. I'm not sure they're 100% happy, but they have, for the sake of ensuring that it's sort of a good relationship with the community, they've accepted those conditions. And the objectors who are going to come this evening have withdrawn, so they're not here. And I appreciate both the applicants and the objectors sort of working together to come to a compromise. And our environmental health officer is very satisfied that we've got noise conditions here that are extremely robust. So from the noise angle, I think we're very satisfied as officers that we got the issue covered.
Soundproofing a private office is different.
Any members, any question more? We need to...
Don't vote for it.
If there is no question, we need to move a motion, please.
Against.
Councillor, please.
Yes, I hear what both sides got to say on this one, but I have a reservation.
Yes.
Obviously, because there is no alternative provision to the youth facility.
Keep that in your head.
Facility. And
keep that in the front of your head.
I don't know whether that it can be accepted as a ground to refuse this application. I would like to propose refuse this application on that ground.
I think, Councillor, that it's open to the committee to refuse on whatever grounds you think are, if you disagree with the officer with respect to the principle of development, it's open to you to make a motion to refuse the scheme on that basis. I would caution you that I think that making a motion to refuse the scheme on alternative provision.
Do it. He can do it.
Should have been
Shut
made
up.
to the Mayor Cabinet in 2000.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So you would be proposing to refuse the scheme on something that the officer advises that's not material.
Well, it is.
The planning decision
it is material.
I think that the applicants do have a right of appeal here, and so we have to be mindful that
they've had 3 goes. This is their 3rd appeal.
On a reason for refusal that's not material planning consideration, that must be appeal costs. So I think that's something we might have to hear from the legal officer on. I think my advice on that would be that it would be unsound to conclude that you could refuse the scheme on the basis that the provision of alternative community facilities would make it harmful in planning terms.
Stitch up.
Yeah, can I just have more clarification on this point that Councillor Penfold made about the fact that when the last application was rejected, it was rejected on the very grounds that he was presenting tonight, and I don't really understand what exactly has changed between now and then. I mean, you've said
nothing has changed. They've just changed the fucking laws around.
Could you just kind of I really need that clarified.
So internally,
Sorry, James, can I add to that?
Sure.
So the previous applications of the applicants, how we assess the applications, we expect applicants to provide the evidence and to provide, acknowledgement of policies relevant to community use in this case, which with the first application they haven't done so. If you compare the planning statement submitted with the refused application and planning statement submitted with this application, they have now included the list of community facilities in the vicinity, alternative community facilities. Also, I'd like to point to the reports from Mayor and Cabinet. I think that community facilities are looked at as a part of the Lewisham borough as a whole, rather than as word by word, and I think that those reports refer to Moonshot Community Center as the closest relevant, and I think one of those reports states that the users of the center would be referred to that center.
Well, that was 5 years. They've been there for 5 years. They've shut it.
Whereabouts is this other community centre?
It is about 12-minute walk north.
No, it's 20.
Like north of New Cross Road.
It's 20 minutes, you liar.
You're saying it was up to the applicant to actually provide the information about the alternative provision?
Yeah.
Well, as their submission, we expect them to address relevant policies, which they haven't done in the first refused application.
I think in summary, Councillor, what was before us then in the previous application didn't make the case that this was part of a larger community transformation plan. Part of that has been supplemented by other officers like colleagues from elsewhere in the council. So Liz Dart has said sort of what the history is, how we got from A to B. The estates manager, so James Lee, has given us that information as well. That wasn't before us last time.
They've made it up, that's why.
What is the community transformation plan? Can you explain what that is?
I mean, I think that we can safely say it's a policy term in the London Plan that shows that the council has gone through the process. So if this hadn't been to Mayor and Cabinet and we were losing a community facility that wasn't part of the council's larger strategic direction, so it was the council's choice, as resolved to stop funding.
You leased it as a community centre.
That's gone through the process, and so it's gone to various committees and gone through the process. It's not a one-off. We haven't decided just to lose this community facility. It's part of the strategic direction of Lewisham.
This isn't strategy. This is not strategy.
And just to add, those reports for 2015 and 2017 are available on the website for the application.
There's some other stuff on there you might want to look at as well.
Members?
The motion is on the table, so I don't know whether it's going to be. Well, I think can I withdraw that motion with the basis that I've got any information about the 12-minute walk to the next the nearest facility.
It's not 12 minutes.
I don't have a motion to place at the moment. I still haven't been convinced that this is the right move.
It's a bad move. Trust yourself.
Well, we have to decide. Members, we have to decide this application in front of us.
Don't do it. Come on, Penfold.
I'm going to propose that we accept. I feel like I'm being dragged by my hair to this decision.
Then don't do it.
I feel that the poor decision was made. I agree with the officers that the poor.
This is your chance to change
that. The decision was made in 2015, and it makes it very, very difficult for us to do kind of anything else. I'm not.
It doesn't.
This is not
refuse.
Me saying that I'm in favour of this decision.
Well, you are.
I feel like we don't really have much choice.
You do have a choice. That's your fucking job.
I'm being brought kicking and screaming to this decision. I do completely understand the points that have been made by Councillor Penfold, and I do completely see how there is a massive lack of provision within this area, and if this property does, something happens to this recording studio, I would beg that we look at this again and turn it back into a community space at that juncture.
Oh yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah, that's a nice idea.
I hope that they're successful, and I hope that they can bring the community to their door as they say they're going to.
Oh, come off it.
But it is a sad day for Lewisham that we're going to lose this place.
Yeah, and you're doing it right now. You're doing it. You're doing it. Take responsibility for your actions. spineless. No conviction.
Yeah, Chair,
Shameful.
I also share Councillor Krupski's concerns, and obviously it looks like that we are in a position where we've been, it's like a fix. I've never been told to this like this on a planning application, whereby it looks like it's a predetermined in the public eye. But it looks like we have no alternative other than to.
You do have an alternative.
Just accept the officer's recommendations.
Shame.
And I second Councillor Krupski's proposal.
Shameful.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal has been moved and seconded, so I'll call the roll. Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor Krupski.
For.
Councillor Ogunbadewa.
For, in favour of officer recommendation.
That's 3 votes to 0 in favour of the officer recommendations.
Thank you. Application granted, subject to all the conditions attached to it.
Shameful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.